Oh, you felt that, didn't you? That cold ripple down the back of your neck. That invisible hand gripping your spine before the betrayal even had a name. You felt it. Before the phone call, before the lie was spoken, before the mask slipped off the face you trusted, something inside you, something ancient and untamed, something feral and precise, something they will never understand because they've never possessed it. It already knew. It already saw the ending before the first act was over. And before we dive any deeper, if this channel has ever set fire to something inside your chest, if these words have ever made you feel seen in a world designed to make you invisible, then you need to know we wrote it all down. 2 books, 2 weapons forged from everything you've survived. The Crown of Ash, a dark motivational field manual for the exiled Grim Grit Edition 1, and the Quiet Edge Grim Grit Edition 2. These aren't self-help, these are self-woos. Links are in the description below. Now you're here, not because someone told you to click, not because an algorithm pushed you forward. You're here because that thing inside you, that sixth sense, that silent alarm system buried beneath your ribs and wired into the marrow of your instincts, it brought you. It dragged you to this exact moment, because what I'm about to tell you is going to permanently, irreversibly change how you see every single person who ever smiled at you with venom behind their teeth. So sit down, lock the door, turn the volume all the way up. Because tonight, we're not whispering, we're roaring. Let's set the record straight before we go even one step further. You are not crazy. You were never crazy. Every single time you felt that twitch in your gut, every time your chest tightened around someone who was smiling too wide while their eyes stayed too still, every time your instinct screamed, "Something is wrong here," and the whole room, the whole table, the whole circle told you it was all in your head. You were right. You were right. They called you paranoid. They called you too sensitive. They said you were overthinking, overreacting, overcomplicating things that were supposedly simple. But the truth, the raw and undeniable truth, is that you were the only one in the room who could smell the smoke before the fire even started burning. You were the only one whose internal compass didn't need evidence, didn't need proof, didn't need a signed confession to know the direction of danger, and that single terrifying gift terrified them more than anything you could have ever said out loud or done in the open. Because you can argue with words, you can twist logic, you can manipulate facts, but you absolutely cannot deceive a soul that reads energy the way a scholar reads ancient text, fluently, instinctively, and without mercy. Here's where it gets dark. Here's where the blood starts to show beneath the bandages they thought would hold forever. Because they didn't just doubt your sixth sense, no, that would have been too simple, too lazy, too passive for people like them. They tested it deliberately, strategically, surgically, with the patience of predators and the precision of people who had studied your emotional blueprint for months. They placed traps wrapped in affection. They set up elaborate scenarios designed to make you question your own gut, to second-guess the very instinct that had never once lied to you. They fed you half-truths, seasoned with just enough sincerity to make the poison taste sweet going down. They watched your eyes when they lied to your face. They studied your reactions when they twisted the story just slightly enough to see if you'd catch the edit. They created chaos, beautiful, organized chaos, and then stood back with folded arms and calm, patient faces, waiting, watching. measuring whether your instincts would catch the knife before it hit your back. And every single time your sixth sense flickered and your face changed by even a fraction, they were ready with the same rehearsed, weaponized lying. You're imagining things, but here's the part they didn't plan for. Here's the chapter they forgot to write. Here's the part that shattered their entire experiment and left them bleeding from the inside out with no one to stitch the wound. Your sixth sense didn't just detect the threat, it cataloged it. It archived it with timestamps and footnotes. It recorded every micro-expression, every half-second hesitation, every tone shift, every carefully placed word that didn't match the energy radiating from behind it. You weren't just feeling something was off, you were building a case without even knowing it. Your subconscious was constructing an entire courthouse complete with judge, jury, and evidence locker, while your conscious mind was still being gaslit into thinking the building didn't exist. And when the moment finally came, when the final betrayal was loud enough for even the deaf to hear, and obvious enough for even the blind to see, you didn't collapse in shock. You didn't crumble. You didn't give them the performance they'd been rehearsing their reaction to for weeks. You stood there steady, calm, almost eerily composed. Because deep down in the basement of your being, you'd known all along. Your sixth sense had already processed this loss months before it officially happened. The tears they expected never came. The breakdown they had prepared their sympathy faces for never arrived, because you'd already cried those tears in silence in the dark alone, while they were still rehearsing their next act and fitting their next mask. And oh, how that destroyed them completely, irreparably, because they had built their entire strategy, their entire psychological architecture around the moment of your breakdown. They had rehearsed in their minds exactly how they would comfort you with hollow words, how they would say, "I told you so," without technically saying it. How they would position themselves as the rational ones, the stable ones, the emotionally mature ones who never let feelings cloud their crystal clear judgment. But when you stood there unmoved, unbroken, unflinching, looking at them with eyes that said, "I already knew this was coming and I chose to let you reveal yourself," the floor beneath their performance cracked wide open. The audience they'd been playing for vanished. The applause they expected, the validation, the relief of finally being proven right about you, it all turned into a silence so deafening, so thick, so suffocating, that it echoed in their bones for weeks and settled into their dreams for months. Your sixth sense didn't just protect you, it humiliated them, not with words, not with confrontation, not with revenge or exposure or any of the reactions they prepared contingency plans for, but with the most terrifying weapon a human being can wield. The unshakable, undeniable truth that you saw every single move before they made it. And you chose to sit back and let them reveal themselves on their own stage, in their own time, with their own rope wrapped around their own necks. Let's talk about that blood, shall we? Because this isn't poetic decoration. This isn't metaphor dressed in leather trying to look tough. The blood I'm talking about is as real as anything that's ever stained a surface. It's the blood of truth, the blood that spills when years of carefully constructed lies are finally cut open by something sharper than evidence. The blood that stains the hands of everyone who thought they could operate on your life without you feeling the incision, without you noticing the anesthesia wearing off, without you realizing the surgery was never meant to heal you, but to remove the parts of you that made you dangerous to them. Every whisper they planted behind your back, every alliance they built against you in rooms you weren't invited into, every narrative they twisted and polished to make you the villain of a story you didn't even know was being written and distributed. All of it bled the moment your sixth sense struck back. You didn't need a confession. You didn't need screenshots or text messages or receipts or third-party validation from someone brave enough to tell you the truth. Your instincts walked into the courtroom of your life, laid the evidence on the table without saying a word, and the verdict was unanimous. Guilty. Every last one of them. Guilty of underestimating the one person in the room who was paying attention with more than just their eyes. And here is what haunts them now. Here is the part that keeps them tossing and turning at 3 to roll in the morning, staring at ceilings that feel lower and heavier than they used to. They cannot figure out how you knew. They have replayed their own performances 1,000 times from every possible angle. They have analyzed their own lies with forensic intensity, checked their own alibis for holes, reviewed their own scripts for flaws, and they cannot find the crack. They cannot locate the exact moment, the precise second where your sixth sense intercepted their signal and decoded their entire operation. Because the truth is, there was no single moment. It was all of them. Every single interaction was a data point. Your instincts were collecting and connecting. It was the way their laughter arrived half a second too late, just slightly off rhythm. The way their eyes moved to the left when they said, "I promise." The way their body leaned away from you, creating invisible distance. When their words leaned in with fabricated warmth, you were reading a language they didn't even know they were speaking. A language older than any alphabet. A language of vibration, of frequency, of electromagnetic truth that your body decoded fluently, effortlessly, mercilessly, while your brain was still processing their pleasantries and trying to convince yourself that everything was fine. That is what makes a sixth sense truly dangerous. Not that it knows, but that it knows before knowing is even logically possible. It operates in the realm of precognition, not prediction. It doesn't guess based on available data. It receives transmissions from a bandwidth that most people don't even know exists. And what it received from them was a broadcast of deceit. So loud, so constant, so arrogantly careless, so offensively sloppy that even your quietest, most generous instinct couldn't ignore it or explain it away anymore. They thought they were clever. They genuinely believed their masks were custom-fitted, hand-stitched, designer deception, tailored specifically to your blind spots and emotional tendencies. But your sixth sense has infrared vision that penetrates every layer of performance. It doesn't see the mask. It sees the heat behind it, the racing pulse of someone midline, the shallow breath of someone performing sincerity, the micro-sweat of a conscience trying to drown itself in justification and rehearsed rationalizations. And when you looked at them, really looked at them with the full force of your awakened perception, you weren't seeing a friend. You weren't seeing a lover. You weren't seeing a trusted colleague. You were seeing a threat dressed in familiarity, wrapped in history, perfumed with shared memories. And your entire nervous system went into quiet, devastating, stone-cold alert mode. Let me tell you something about silence that most people will never, not in their entire lifetimes, understand. Most people think silence is emptiness, an absence of sound, an absence of power, an absence of response, a white flag, a retreat, a surrender. But you discovered something that rewrote the entire rulebook of human engagement and interpersonal warfare. You discovered that silence is the loudest, most devastating, most psychologically destructive weapon in the arsenal of someone whose sixth sense has been fully activated and calibrated. Because when you went quiet, when you stopped reacting to provocations designed to trigger you, when you stopped defending yourself against accusations that were crafted to drain your energy and scatter your focus, something shifted in the atmosphere between you and them. The entire dynamic flipped like a table in a room full of cheaters who suddenly realized the dealer has been watching. Suddenly, they were the ones filling the silence with nervous, rambling chatter. Suddenly, they were the ones over-explaining things nobody asked about, over-justifying decisions nobody questioned, over-performing, snorts, their innocence for an audience of one who wasn't even watching anymore. Suddenly, they were the ones studying your face for a reaction that never came, a flinch that never materialized, a wound that never appeared, and that absolute refusal to perform on their stage. That was the exact moment your sixth sense stopped being merely a warning system and became a weapon of mass clarity. You see, they needed you loud. They needed you emotional, chaotic, scattered, reactive, impulsive, spilling your energy into fights that were never meant to be won. Only endured, only survived, only barely escaped. Because as long as you were in defense mode, as long as you were putting out the fires they kept lighting, your sixth sense was distracted from the real operation happening behind the smokescreen. It was busy processing the surface-level drama while the deeper, quieter, more surgical manipulations slid through undetected beneath the noise. That was their entire game plan from the beginning. Flood the radar with emotional interference. Overwhelm the detection system with chaos and confusion. Create enough static, enough arguments, enough crises that the real signal, the real truth gets lost in the storm. But then you did something they never anticipated. You went silent. You pulled back. You stopped giving them your energy like it was free electricity flowing through an outlet they'd been plugging into for years without paying a single bill. And the moment that energy stopped flowing, the radar cleared. The noise dropped to zero. And what your sixth sense showed you in that silence was devastating. Not because it was complicated or layered or difficult to decode, but because it was so painfully, so unbearably, so insultingly simple. They were never confused about you. They were never genuinely trying to understand you or work things out. They were systematically trying to dismantle you piece by piece, reaction by reaction, emotional explosion by emotional explosion. And every argument, every cold shoulder, every sudden mood shift, every passive-aggressive comment disguised as a harmless joke, it was all part of the same coordinated campaign, not organized with formal meetings and strategy documents, but orchestrated through the unspoken, intuitive agreement of people who share the same sickness, the compulsive, addictive, pathological need to maintain control over someone who was never meant to be controlled. And your silence exposed every single thread of it. Not with accusations, not with confrontation, not with a dramatic speech or a public unraveling or a social media expose, but with the terrifying, almost supernatural patience of someone who has stopped playing the game entirely and is now sitting in the stands watching the players destroy each other and themselves in real time without lifting a single finger. You became the mirror they couldn't avoid, no matter which direction they turned. You became the stillness that made their manufactured chaos visible, not just to you, but to everyone around them who had been too distracted by the noise to notice the pattern. You became the calm that revealed their storm was always self-inflicted, always manufactured, always a projection of the tornado spinning inside their own hollow, restless, insatiable chests. And in that silence, your sixth sense did something extraordinary. Something that changed the rules permanently. It stopped warning you. It stopped sending alarms and flares and emergency signals. Not because the danger had passed, but because the danger no longer had access to you. You had evolved past their frequency entirely. You had tuned them out so completely, so permanently, so irreversibly, that their manipulations hit a wall of indifference so thick, so dense, so absolute that they began to wonder in their darkest private moments whether their tactics had ever actually worked on anyone at all. And that crisis of confidence, that catastrophic crumbling of their carefully constructed identity as puppet masters and emotional architects. That was the blood, that was the wound that won't close. That was your sixth sense striking back in the most brutal, most permanent, most psychologically devastating way possible by making you completely, totally, permanently unreachable. Now, let's talk about the Watchers. Because the ones who tested your sixth sense were not always the loudest voices in the room, not always the obvious aggressors with their insults and their confrontations and their dramatic provocations. Some of them, the most dangerous ones, never said a single word against you. Not one syllable. Not one raised eyebrow in public. They didn't need to. Their silence was a different kind of weapon entirely. Sharper than any insult. Colder than any betrayal you could name. More lethal than any lie spoken to your face. They sat in the background like intelligence operatives, observing, gathering, cataloging your reactions with surgical precision, mapping your vulnerabilities, your emotional tendencies, your exact pressure points, the precise words and situations that made you flinch or soften or open up. They were the quiet ones at the dinner table, who noticed when your smile didn't quite reach your eyes and filed that observation away for future leverage. The ones who remembered an offhand comment you made 3 months ago about your fears or your insecurities and stored it like classified intelligence to be deployed at the strategically optimal moment. The ones who never attacked you directly, never left their fingerprints on the weapon, but fed ammunition, context, emotional blueprints, and detailed psychological profiles to the ones who did the visible dirty work. Your sixth sense picked them up too, not immediately. Not with the same blaring, unmistakable alarm it reserved for the obvious, loudmouth threats, who announced their intentions with every clumsy move, but with a slow, creeping, bone-deep discomfort that you couldn't name or locate for the longest time. A persistent feeling that someone in your inner circle was watching you the way a collector watches a rare specimen behind glass. Not with love, not with genuine curiosity, but with cold, detached, predatory calculation. And when you finally identified them, when your sixth sense connected the invisible dots between their carefully innocent questions and the chaos that always mysteriously seemed to erupt within days of those conversations, something inside you went cold. Not angry, not vengeful, not dramatic, just cold. The kind of bone-deep, permanent cold that comes from realizing you've been studied, measured, documented, and reported on by someone who was supposed to care about you. Someone who sat at your table, ate your food, laughed at your jokes, and was memorizing your weaknesses the entire time. The kind of cold that retroactively rewrites every warm memory you shared with them and adds a footnote of suspicion and contamination that can never ever be erased, no matter how hard you try. You didn't confront them. You didn't need to. A confrontation would have given them information, would have shown them exactly what you knew and didn't know, would have handed them the map of your awareness so they could navigate around it. Instead, you simply adjusted your orbit. You changed what you shared, what you revealed, what version of yourself you allowed them to access. You gave them the museum tour instead of the backstage pass. Polished glass cases, velvet ropes, a gift shop on the way out, and they felt it. They felt the walls go up, brick by brick, floor by floor. They felt a temperature shift in your presence, like a season changing overnight without warning. And for the first time in their carefully controlled, meticulously curated, obsessively managed existence, they experienced something they had never planned for. They panicked. Not visibly, not loudly, not in any way you could point to or prove, but internally, catastrophically, irreversibly, because they realized with a sickening certainty that settled in their stomach like a stone that they had been detected, not caught, not exposed publicly, not dragged into the light for all to see, but detected privately, silently, completely by a sense they didn't even believe existed in anyone, let alone in